talk table saws. We've got a couple of different table saws in the shop here for you guys to use. Primarily table saws are used for finish work. Any cabinetry or fine finish woodwork, you would use a table saw. Gives you a very precise, straight cut, providing that you use it right. I want to point out a few features of the table saw. You can see the actual table itself. It's a metal table. What you want to do is you want to make sure that this table remains smooth. That means you don't want to put any beverages on there or anything sticky, because if you don't keep this table nice and smooth, you can't push the materials through. The table also has a couple of grooves in here. I'll explain what those are for in a second. You've got the blade.
We're going to go over the types of blades that for table saw and chop saw that people particularly use. This right here is your 10-inch. This right here is your 12-inch. Now, if you look closely here, it tells you the 10-inch right here, and it tells you the 12-inch there. But the main difference is that you got to look at the teeth. So this is 24 teeth, and this one over here has 80 teeth. You're going to do fine material, like consider doing trim work, ripping a hardwood or oak. You probably want to go with this blade here. Anytime you're doing construction trade, you know what I'm saying, this is what is recommended. It's cheaper going with this. This usually comes with the machine, whatever machine you buy with, does the work. This right here, you have to upgrade to a different blade size. They come in, both of them are coming 12 and 10. Same thing with circular saw, 7 1/4. Those, they have them in fine finish too, and they have them in the rougher grade. So what I did here is that I took all the table saw components apart, so I make sure everything's nice and tight and everything's nice and square. This right here is a plate to block all the hardware. This was loose earlier. See how it's loose? You got to make sure this is tight. Otherwise, when you push the wood through, it'll get stuck. So you got to tighten this down. Make sure it's tight and snug. Check out your blades. Make sure nothing's chipped off. But otherwise, this right now is nice and tight. This blade looks good. Then we put the plate back. The next thing you want to know is that this here grabs the wood so it don't kick back on you. It's locked in. So make sure that this here gets locked into its rightful place.
Move your hand so I can see the teeth on that bad boy.
So this right here grabs the wood once you're letting go of the wood. You should never let go of the wood anyway. Simple as that. This right here is your guide for the blade here. You want to make sure this is on too. So now it's nice and tight. This is nice and tight. It's all ready to be cut. And like I said, anytime you're cutting, make sure it's a 1/4 inch patch of material. So if I was cutting this 3/4 inch plywood, if you look carefully, my blade's only about 1/4 inch past the material. And that's what you want to maintain. You don't want to go any higher than that. The only time you go any higher than that, if you have no choice because the wood is bold, then you probably want to raise the blade higher. Otherwise, that's it, 1/4 inch past material.
Next, let's look at the fence. Miss H is going to slide it over into position and then use the lever on the end to lock it down. This gives us the guide that we run our material up against. By pressing our plywood tight to it, it'll give us a parallel cut to the saw blade. It gives us a straight and accurate cut, and we need to make sure we keep our piece of material firmly up against it. There's also this scale at the edge of the blade. It will tell us how wide the cut is going to be. It's always a good idea to check with the tape measure as well.
I don't always trust my arm. I don't trust that they lock in a straight line, so I actually take my tape measure out and measure. If I wanted a piece of material that was 9 inches wide, I have got to take my tape, and you see how 9 inches is right in the middle? I need to put it out so that I have 9 inches from the fence to the blade. Okay, so I not only check it in the front of the blade, but I also check it towards the back. So I had the same measurement on the back side of my blade as the front side. I want to get that out. Okay. Also, you'll see the depth of this blade. If I was cutting a piece of 3/4 material, I do not need my blade this tall. So I am gonna actually lower my blade down. You'll swing around this way. What you wanna do is to adjust the depth of your blade is take this dial and you can see how the blade is going back into the table saw. Now, how far do I want my blade up? Just like we learned in Hand & Power Tools, you want your blade sticking up and over the material anywhere from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. What if we wanted an angle cut or a bevel cut? There's another feature on the saw. I'm going to actually raise it up so you can see what happens here. Say I wanted a 15-degree bevel. There's also a dial on the other side of the saw here that when I turn this, if you look at the saw blade, you can see that it's actually turning at an angle until I get the proper degree. See how that's angling now? To that degree. And then it will rip that piece of material at that degree. Some table saws will tell you what degree you've actually spun it to. For our first cut, I'm going to put it back to a 90 degree, and usually it'll just stop on that 90 degree point. If you wanted to check to make sure that it's at a 90, you could just take a speed square and set it up against your blade, and that'll tell you if it's at a 90 degree. Okay? All right, so I'm gonna lower the piece again, or the blade down, so I can cut through my material. And that's pretty good right there. Okay, raise it up just a touch. Okay. With this particular table saw, we have written on the top of the arm that you cannot cut material any less than 2 inches. That means 2 inches from the blade. You see how narrow that strip is? The reason why I say that is because as we're pushing the material through, we're going to take what we call a push stick, or we have Mr. Strand's B-Dog stick. Custom made. What we do is we actually take this stick, and I can feed it with my hands so far, but then once I'm starting to get close to the blade itself, I don't want my hand in the way of that blade, so I will use the push stick to finish out that cut, and my hands are all free so that they don't get cut from it. I'm just literally pushing it through. The biggest thing with the table saw though is that you want to keep your material up against this arm at all times, and to run the piece through the saw slowly. So I'll make this cut. I'll leave it where it's at. My guard is down. The trigger is right here. Let it start up. Make sure that nobody is around. And know this, when you're pushing the material through, this material is coming out past the table saw. Make sure there's nothing in the way so that your material gets stuck in the midstream. If it happens to where you cannot get your material pushed through, it feels like something's binding, go ahead and shut the saw down right away. Don't try to pull the material or jerk it around. The last thing you want is for one of these pieces to shoot back and hit you or hit somebody that's behind you. So we'll fire it up. Let the RPMs run to full capacity and then start pushing through with both hands. push it all the way through, and you can let it fall. Gives you a nice straight cut if you use it properly. I believe you could go up to 2.5 inches on this particular saw in depth. If I wanted to have a small strip like this, less than 2 inches, if I push it through this way, I would end up with a 2-inch strip on this side, wouldn't I? So you have to think about what you're doing. You want to remain mentally alert when you're using any tool of this sort. There's a lot of advantages to it, but there can be a lot of dangers as well when you're using a table saw. So as always, be careful. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, have one of the instructors help you out. We'll get you comfortable with the tool once you get back. Okay?